Hello. Good morning, everyone. How is everyone doing? I'm going to wait a little bit just to see if anyone else is going to join us. But I will explain, if you haven't used Demio before, there is a chat, which I think you can click on the top right. You should see the word chat. You can click on that and hopefully that should come up. So you're welcome to type in there. There's no cameras or mics on this one either, so you haven't got to worry about that. Hi Stacey, hi Lizzie. Lovely to see you both. I thought I'd sit outside today, so there might be a few random animals that start to walk in, but hopefully that should be okay. Brilliant. Hello. Lovely to see you all here. So during this, I'm probably not gonna Yay, well done. I'm not going to look at the chat too much. I'm going to kind of flick back and forth to it only because I get really distracted really easily. So to make it slightly easier and hopefully make it flow a little bit better, I'm going to hide the chat and then keep checking in it. So if you have got any questions, feel free to ask on there and I will come back to you. And also I've got Stacey here as well with me today, who's going to be help monitoring the chat as well, which is really useful. Thank you. Cool. Okay, so I think we'll get started. So today we're going to be looking at how we can use photography as a tool for mindfulness and communication. Photography is particularly good for us quieter people. It's a very visual way of communicating, and luckily we don't need to use words, which also helps quite a lot when you don't feel like talking too much. So it's really, really good. It can be used for loads of different things, which we're going to cover as well. But at the end, we're going to particularly look at how we can use it to help us look at mindfulness and help us to be more mindful, and also look at it as a way that we can use it for communication as well. So this is my first free introductory workshop for this. We've got a 6-month course, which is going to be running. This is the first session, and there'll be 6 more after this. So at the end, I believe you'll be sent to the app with a link to it. So you're welcome to join me on that. That would be awesome. Okay, so so I thought I'd start off. I don't really have many photos of me with the camera, so here's one with me and a dog. But I started using photography as a tool about 10 years ago. I was in my mid-teens. I was definitely classed as very shy back then. So for me, it was a really good way to communicate my own feelings and communicate the way that I see the world without having to put myself out there as much. So I ended up going on to study it at university as well. So I did that. And it still to this day helps me. It definitely helps me push my comfort zones quite a lot. And yeah, it's a really good tool for when you're feeling you want to do things, but if you feel quite shy or socially anxious at that point, it's a really good way to kind of help you get out of that. So it's really, really useful. I always think of it as kind of like my safety blanket that makes me do things that I wouldn't do otherwise. So I wanted to start off with just a little question. So as I'm assuming most people before have taken photos, maybe not thinking of it as photography, but a lot of us now have cameras on our phones and we can document different things. So I just wanted to ask, what does photography mean to you? So you can type your answers in the chat, or you can have a little think about it. But I know for me, it traditionally starts off with a sort of way to record a memory. Um, it could be a favorite place, a favorite time, a favorite person, and it's a chance for us to record that and remember it. Um, I think especially nowadays, I don't know about you guys, but my mind is so full with so many different things that by taking photos, I get to record all these memories that I will probably forget otherwise. So yes, that's a really, really good one. Catching memories and moments to record fur babies and crafts, exactly things that we're doing and things that we love. Um, a way to capture a moment to observe and tell a story that's really, really good. That's pretty much what we're going to be looking at in this. And yeah, that's brilliant. You know, it can be used as a way to have time for you. Um, you know, like you said, you can find beautiful things and remember those things. So already we know it's a really fantastic tool. So how can photography specifically help us quieter people? Well, amazingly, everything, well, 85% of our perception, our learning, our cognition, and the activities that we do is through vision, which is pretty amazing. So I always find, you know, when we think of us quieter people, we think that we, you know, are quite reserved and we're not putting things out into the world. But when you think it pretty much, you know, 85% of the things that we do is through vision, then there has to be another way than through, you know, through speaking. Um, so that's where photography can become a really, really useful tool for us. That's really, really interesting, Esther. Yeah, absolutely. So I think social media can be really difficult now because we do have that almost pressure to we stop doing it for ourselves, and we start to do it for, you know, how many likes we can get or how many people comment on it. So I think it's really important when you're doing photography to sometimes what I tend to do is kind of keep myself a sort of private little album, um, which I don't share with people that I just want to look at. And I think that can be a really good way for us to sort of differentiate that, you know, that kind of need for likes and everything. And it just allows us to have those special moments. So yeah, that's a really, really good point. So I think, yeah, personally, I think photography can really strengthen our quiet outlook, because we can do so many different things without talking. So I'm going to just run through some of the things that photography can help us to develop. Um, so as I said, for me, I've been doing it for about 10 years or so, and over that time, it's really helped me develop a lot of different tools, and really strengthened my sort of quiet self, which has been really useful. So to start off, it's helped me with self-expression. Sometimes it can be really, really hard to talk about our feelings and our emotions, especially when we're quieter and we struggle with that communication. So for me, it's helped me photograph things that I can relate to. And then I can, if I want to, I can put them out into the world, or I can again keep them for myself, and it can kind of keep track of my own emotions and my own feelings. So it's a really good tool for self-expression. Sometimes you might find something and you relate to it. And similarly, you might find something that you don't relate to, so you don't want to photograph it. So it's really useful for that. So I'd recommend, you know, if you do see something that you relate to, photograph it if you feel like that's kind of how you're feeling. I think you start to look at the world in a different way as well. You start to look at things in a more personal level, which can be really interesting. So the second thing it's helped me do is explore interests. Now I find I think there's a lot of pressure in society that when you have an interest in something, you have to follow that interest through, and you have to, completely be absorbed, and you have to know everything about it. And a lot of the time that can really hold us back from actually exploring that interest, because we think, oh, I don't know enough about this, I'm not good enough at this, I'm never gonna, be able to be interested in that. But sometimes we want to just sort of have a little look and explore. And that's what photography can really, really do. You can start photographing something just because you're interested in it, and it almost gives you an excuse. You don't have to know everything about it, but you have to sort of, you start learning little bits, bit by bit. So for me in this picture, I have no interest in tractors. This is tractor pulling, and it's like a weird sport where they make tractors really crazy and they pull a big weight. I would have no interest in this normally, but it was something that my dad was interested in because he used to be a tractor engineer. And I was like, oh, I kind of want to have a look and just see what it's about. Um, so, I went along to photograph it, and I learned something kind of cool, but I'm not going to go out and buy go and buy a tractor and start putting loads of turbos on it. um, yeah, so it's a really good way that we can start to explore things that we want to. And like Stacey just said, you can dip your toe in and just have a little look. And if you do want to follow that through, you can. Or you can just say, okay, that was cool to see, I'm not going to look at it again. So it's really, yeah, a really useful tool for that. So the next thing, creating connections. Now that's something that I think as quieter people, we really struggle. Well, I personally really struggle with. I find it hard to just go and talk to people or say, like, start a random conversation. But photography gives you this way to start creating connections with people, and these might only be temporary connections, or they could be lifelong ones. So the girls I photographed in this photo, I only saw them for about a week or so, but I created a connection with them, and I although I couldn't speak their language, I kind of waved at them every day, and like, have these little moments, and that can still have a really profound impact on you, just knowing that you can relate to these people even if you can't talk to them. Yeah, so I think it's a really good tool for creating connections. And sometimes you might, there's people that I've photographed that I will still talk to now. Even if it's only once a year or something, you build up a little community, and you find people that are similar to you, just like within Quiet Connections. Yeah, so it's really useful for that as well. Now, the next one is listening. Now, as quieter people, we tend to be pretty good at listening. I feel like that's what we spend a lot of our time doing. But sometimes we don't actually kind of hear what other people are saying. We are listening, but we are worried about our response. That's what I find anyway. So photography can be a really useful tool. You can ask people questions, or a lot of the time you'll find that they will just want to talk to you, and they want to tell you their story. And I think that's a really important thing, because you kind of find something to relate to within it. So it draws you out of that sort of feeling of anxiety as they start to open up to you. It can make you feel a bit more comfortable. So yeah, it creates a really, really powerful tool for being able to listen. The other thing is, as well, I also find it kind of makes your job a little bit easier, because you don't have to do too much of the talking. You can just have a listen. So the next one is communication, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a bit, because that's one of our main focuses. But communication, it gives us a real reason to stretch our comfort zones. Kind of as I was saying with the interests, there's no way I would ever walk up to a stranger and say, hi, like, what's your life story? What you doing? yeah, when you have a camera, it's kind of like you can be like, oh, you know, sometimes I just take a photo of them without asking, which you probably shouldn't do, but when you're feeling a bit sort of shy, you don't want to ask them. So, but a lot of the time you give them a smile and they'll just kind of nod. Um, and then you know, sometimes they'll come over and they'll just start talking to you, and it's a great way to open up that communication. Um, or as I was saying with self-expression, it's a really good way for us to communicate our own feelings. Um, it's not so much about words, it's just conveying our vision into the world. Yeah, I always get really terrified of taking pictures of people, to be fair. But I think you'll be amazed at how many people are so accepting of it. Um, I think a lot of the time people feel a lot quite flattered about having their photo taken. It's quite like a, oh, thank you. um, but yeah, it's something that does come with a lot of practice. And there are many, many, many times where I have gone to take a photo of someone and gone, no, and turned around and just walked away. And that's totally fine. I think it depends on how you're feeling. Um, but this is, you know, this is quite a hard thing to do. But something we'll sort of start to look into a little bit more later on in the course. So next is storytelling, which I think Stacey mentioned earlier on. Now, photos have an amazing way of telling stories. You know, we often hear that phrase, one photo can say 1,000 words. And I honestly think that's really, really true. We can get so much from photos, and amazingly, we can tell stories completely through photos without, you know, having to actually say anything. Um, so I think that's, yeah, really, really important. And the best thing is as well, we can either choose to tell our own stories, or sometimes we can choose to tell other people's stories. And that's just as fascinating as we start to sort of bring ourselves out and we start to connect with other people. And you tend to want to start to tell stories that relate to your own life. So yeah, I think storytelling for photography is a really, really fascinating thing. So building confidence, I think I spoke about this quite a lot. Um, Photography is just a massive comfort zone stretch for me a lot of the time if you want to do it in a documentary style. Um, so I'll quickly tell you about this story. So this was something that I still can't believe that I actually went and did. um, that's amazing, Rose. That's so good. Shame that there's no goats, but it's such an amazing and useful tool. And I think as well with storytelling, we can do it through so many other visual things as well, like with your crafts. You know, we can all find our own way to tell stories, and it doesn't just have to be through words. And I think that's really important. But yeah, with this story, so basically, I ended up randomly finding on Facebook these three guys that did this traditional art of bokator, which is like Cambodian fighting. I don't know why I had no interest in fighting again, but I was like, oh, that sounds different. So I messaged them on Facebook and I said, could I come and take some photos of you? And they said, yeah, that's fine. And they picked me up on the back of their moped and they had machetes and like these giant pole things. And I was like, what am I doing? This is ridiculous and something I would never, I don't know, yeah, I would never do. Um, but it was really interesting, and they took me out to this little farm in the rural areas of Cambodia, and I sat there and I ate breakfast with them. I think I ate some like fish heads and some leather, and it was disgusting, but it was a nice gesture. Um, and again, I couldn't speak to them because I didn't speak their language and they didn't speak mine. But through photography, I was able to do something that I would never ever dream of doing. Um, so yeah, it was a massive comfort zone stretch for me, and it's still one of those one of those things that I can't believe I did it. Um, but yeah, I think it photography can present a lot of amazing opportunities for us that we can use. They don't have to be that crazy either. They can even just be sometimes, there's some people in my town that I don't know, but I would like to know their name kind of thing. Like, when you speak to someone, but it's got to the point where you can't ask their name now. Photography can be a good way just to be like, oh, can I take a portrait for something? And they'll hopefully then retell you their name. So it can just be little things as well. So yeah, it's a really good way to help us build our confidence. So the next one I was going to look at is patience. Now, with a lot of photography, it doesn't come straight away. You know, with our mindful photography and our communication photography, we're not looking for perfection. We just want to take photos, and that's amazing. But sometimes it can still take a long time. If we're looking for something in particular, maybe you're looking for something to relate to, it requires a lot of patience. Sorry, the cat's in the background again. And I thought I'd just share another photo. That's sort of one picture of one moth, and I did probably 200 photos of it. So yeah, that just shows you don't get it right every time, and that's totally fine. But it does just require a lot of patience, and it's so good to help us develop that tool. And originally, when I started photography, I thought of myself as a very impatient person. I kind of started it because I wanted to express myself through an arty way, but I was too impatient to sit down and draw. So it's like, I use photography, it's so much quicker. But I think over time you realize that actually it still takes a lot of patience. So it's really awesome that you get to develop that. And the other thing is, I think it makes us very aware of our surroundings. We start to look at things very differently. You can sit in your garden and just think of it, oh, it's my garden. But I think with photography, your perspective on things changes and you become very aware of what's around you. You start looking at textures and colors and patterns, and all these things can start to draw you into that mindful state where you're just being and you're very present. Rather than just dismissing everything, you're looking at everything with some kind of detail. So it's really useful, I think, when we're feeling anxious, if we do photography, we can start to look at all these things and become very aware of our surroundings. So I think it's really, really useful for that. And also, it does help us create a great eye for detail, which is a wonderful thing for your CV, is what I found. We start, like I said a second ago, you start to look at things in a very detailed manner, and you almost become trained to notice everything. So it's really good for picking up on those small things, and again, really good for including on a CV too. And finally, we get to start to feel thankful and accept the world around us. We become very grateful for the little things that are here. The pretty bark on a tree that we wouldn't have noticed before. All of a sudden, we're very thankful for the fact that that tree is in our garden. We start to accept the world as it is as well. As we sort of begin to look at it more, we are able to accept, things aren't always perfect and aren't always how you want them to be. But I think that's really important for us as well, because we often feel that we should be perfect and we should be conforming to a world. Yet when we start to look at the world in detail, we realize that nothing's perfect, and the things aren't conforming to the world, and that's totally fine. And maybe we shouldn't have to conform to the world either. We can be our quieter selves, and that's okay. I found photography has really helped me with that sort of acceptance of change, but also the self-acceptance as well. Oh, it's lovely, Esther. Sunrises are always a beautiful one to watch. Um, they do sort of, you know, they're that very calming time of day, and everything's just starting to wake up, and it's all a little bit slow. Um, yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful time of day. Cool. So I'm now going to move on to our kind of first main subject, which is photography for mindfulness. So for you guys, what do you feel that mindfulness is to you? Again, you can type it in the chat or you can just think about it. Whether it's, that state of perfect phrase, being present in the moment, that sort of feeling of just being rather than working towards anything. It's a great chance for our body to calm down and sort of accept our thoughts and our feelings as they are. Beautiful clarity, pure intention, presence, and breath. Absolutely. And these are all things that photography can help to bring to us as well. So I've got sort of a definition. Mindfulness is a mental state achieved by focusing one's awareness on the present moment while calmly acknowledging and accepting one's thoughts and feelings and bodily sensations. And it's amazing that, I think a lot of the time when we think of mindfulness, we think we have to kind of, well, for me, I know I feel like I have to sit there and focus on being, which kind of defeats the point of being mindful. So unless it's through a guided meditation, I can't really do that. But I have found that, through photography in particular, it really allows me all of those things that we've mentioned, the clarity, the intention, the being present. You notice your thoughts, but you don't act on them. Photography can help bring that to us without having to sort of physically sit down and do it. We kind of just become in this state without realizing it. So photography can help us to be mindful by, like I said, putting us in the moment and being present. It can be very slow and contemplative as well, so we don't have to rush it. We can simply just take our time with it. It's really good as well that if we can set a time or set aside some time in order to do that. As I mentioned before as well, it allows us to look at the details, and that looking at the detail again can really draw us out of any anxious feelings. It can help us just to notice what's there. Something that we'll be looking at as well is perspectives and how we can look at things in different ways. And not only can we do that with the things we're looking at, but it will be really interesting when we can start to relate that back to ourselves. So we can, start to maybe look at how we're viewing our thoughts in a different way, and how that might help us. It can help us to lose our egos as well. So instead of thinking, oh, I must be doing this or I must be doing that, we don't have any goals. We just here to photograph, and that's it. And we don't have to photograph everything. We can simply think, that looks pretty, and we'll take a photo, and we can observe that in more detail. There is no pressure to get it right. There is no pressure to put it out into the world. We can simply just do it for us. And finally, photography is a very creative thing. There isn't a good and a bad. You often hear, I think especially I found when I was at uni, that, there's a good and a bad photo. But I've always thought it's so creative, and just like art, there isn't a good and a bad. It's all down to subjectivity, What I think's a great photo might be what you think's a terrible photo. But it's all subjective, so that there isn't a good and a bad. It's just a chance to be. And I think, when we're photographing, that can happen too. We can have a lot of thoughts and feelings around ourselves, but when we're photographing something, we aren't those thoughts and feelings. We are just being. And I think, yeah, it's a really, really useful for that. So over time, by doing this, as I just said, we allow ourselves that time to be, and this can really help to lessen our anxiety. It puts us in that present moment, and it gets rid of those thoughts and feelings. Or if we do have them, we just notice them, and we don't have to react on them. And that can be really, really freeing sometimes. We aren't those thoughts and feelings; they are just passing. And I think photography gives us a chance to, sometimes look at those things, but we're almost focused on just something else. So we don't focus on those thoughts and feelings. We fully immerse ourselves into the experience of seeing and observing. So I think this is really important. Like we said, 85% of what we consume is through our vision. And by fully immersing ourselves into that experience of just seeing and just observing, we start to sort of lose those feelings and thoughts that are coming. We are just observing, and that can be really, really special. And in the long term, it can also really help our body to release and reduce the anxiety. And best of all, for us quieters, it is a tool that can be used without speaking. Their words aren't necessary here. We just have to be. We just have to observe. So photography has got many different sort of forms. So mindful photography can be very, very different to what you may perceive photography to be on a sort of a general basis. So mind photography is a non-judgmental way to express yourself. It is a chance to connect to the space around you, bring you out of anxious feelings, and you can shift your energy outwards instead of inwards. Over time, it's a chance to practice gratitude and a chance for you to reflect on what is around you. But what we're not looking at in mindful photography is that focus on technical ability. We don't have to be perfect. That's not the idea. As we said before, there is no good and bad. It's just for you to do, basically. There isn't a critical eye. We're not going to sit there and analyze the photos and say, oh, that could have been better, or we should have framed that better. It's not about that. And it's not a focus on equipment either. You don't have to have a special camera. You can, use your phone. That's totally fine. And you can, if you've got a small pocket camera, that's great too. I would say if you're using a phone, if you can and you feel safe, maybe turn it onto airplane mode, or just turn off your notifications so you don't get distracted by all of those coming in. You just get a chance to photograph sort of as you're going. And the other thing as well, we're not going to compare our photos to others. It doesn't matter what other people are doing. This is for you. I know that can be a lot easier to say than do, but with this, if you don't want to share your photos, that's totally fair enough. And likewise, if you do want to share them, that's brilliant too. But these photos are yours and they are for you. It doesn't particularly matter how they compare to other people's. So I'm going to get started and give you a bit of insight on the first exercise that you guys can try. So as I've said, all you need is basically you. You can use either. It doesn't really matter which. If you want to use a camera or a phone, whatever you find easiest to take with you or move around, you can try both. Sometimes you might just want to use your phone. Sometimes you might want to use your camera. There's really sort of no preference. Just whatever you prefer, basically. So as I said, all you need is a camera, a phone, a pocket camera, if you've got a digital camera, even if you've got a film camera, any of those, it's absolutely fine. All you need is you, and you can also, if you want to, sorry, I've put optional with an extra O there, extra P even. It can be quite nice sometimes if you want to take a notebook with you. You don't have to, because sometimes it can bring you out of that mindful moment. But if you want to start writing down your thoughts and your feelings, as you're, as things happen and as you notice them, maybe you'll start to feel grateful for, you know, a little flower in the grass and you just want to note that down. Or maybe you start to feel anxious feelings arise when you photograph a certain thing. You can note that down as well. So yeah, you can kind of track your thoughts and feelings as well if you want to with a pen and paper, or you can simply just use your camera to do that for you. So with this, we need to remember to slow down. You want to gently orient yourself into your environment and allow your eyes to softly scan the space and notice what your eyes are drawn to. So, you can feel what you're attracted to and feel yourself being in that present moment. And make sure we take some time and create some space to do this. Self-care is extremely important. And I know I'm quite guilty of it, that we think, oh, we don't need to take time for us because I've got too many other things to do. But creating space and taking that time, even if you want to schedule 10 minutes a day, maybe even, 10 minutes a week, just make sure you create that space and reassure yourself that it's okay to take time to do that. And it's actually necessary for you to do that as well. You want to make sure that you have that time and that space for you to just sort of de-stress and help reduce that anxiety and manage that anxiety. And by doing that, you'll then actually be, more productive for yourself and for others around you as well. So yeah, just make sure you take your time to do that. And we want to connect with intention. So, we're not connecting here, like we said, to create beautiful photos. We are connecting to just simply observe and photograph the things that we are attracted to. Just have a go at documenting what you see with your camera. That's the aim here. So the first sort of mindful technique that I'm going to be sharing is noticing light. Now, that's essentially what photography is. That's the basis of any images coming into our eyes. It's just the way that light bounces off of things. I'm not entirely sure how it works, so I'm not going to get into the science of it, but that's essentially what it is. It's just the way that light falls upon items and that enters our eyes. But when we start to really focus on light, we become a much more aware of the way it's falling. So, it's quite bright and sunny today. So we can see that there's a lot of shadow going to start forming. And we start to notice different shapes that can form as well. And that can be really, really interesting. It allows us to really become transfixed on looking at that light and the way that the shadows form. And, just like on a day where it's cloudy, we might notice, there aren't any shadows today. And it can be, really fascinating to notice the way that light changes. So you may even find, some blinds in your house creating a fascinating, very pretty pattern on the wall. It can be really simple things. And we can also watch as well how that light falls in everyday spaces. And that can, we don't even have to go out our house to do this. We can do it from home. We can just look at how in the morning, like Esther said, you get to see the sunrise and the light is just starting to appear. Yet by midday, it might be striking down and you get all these short shadows creating all these tiny shapes. And then when it comes to evening again, we might get these long shadows back. And we can see the shapes that they form as well. And this can really help again put us into the moment as we start to observe and notice these little things. And what I found over time as well is you start to look at light differently. when you're out about every day, you start to notice these little shadows everywhere, and it can be really sort of satisfying and relieving. And especially when you're starting to feel anxious and stuff, if you just think, hey, that's, I've just noticed there's these really cool shadows over there that I wouldn't have looked at before, that are creating a really fascinating pattern, it can almost just shift you out of that mindset and put you into the present moment again. So it can be really useful that as we go on, we start to notice these things. So again, sometimes we might be walking and we will notice random shadows in everyday spaces. And as I said before, sometimes there aren't any shadows. Sometimes we get this, especially if you're based here in Cornwall. I think yesterday, especially, there was loads and loads of sea mist, and everything became very dampened, and the light became very sort of, I don't know how to explain it. It was this very dampened look everywhere, but it was still very beautiful in its own way. But it's really interesting to notice that light and how it can. Yes, exactly, Rose. Thank you. It's very diffused. You get this massive softness everywhere, and that can be really beautiful as well. I think sometimes when we start to look at objects and we realize, hey, there aren't any shadows today, it is just this very soft looking, you know, space. It can also sometimes ground us a little bit as well, because it's this soft and cozy space, rather than sometimes the sun can be quite harsh and create these quite harsh shadows. And also, I think sometimes we start to notice light where we didn't think there was any. So a lot of the time we can look outside at night and we think, oh, it's completely dark. But when we start to look at it and we start to try and photograph it, it can be very hard to photograph at night, by the way. So don't worry if that doesn't work. But just, have a look and see what light that you can spot. So whether it's stars, the moon, it might be street lights, there might be someone with a fire. We start to sort of notice these little patches of light in the darkness that we hadn't sort of seen before. And I think what's really amazing about that is because we can start to relate it to our own thoughts and feelings, and think maybe there isn't just this complete darkness all the time. There is light somewhere. And especially when we do see complete darkness, we think, okay, it's dark now, but that light is going to come back again. And I think it can be really important when we are feeling anxious to try and think about things like that, this is a passing thing. There is light here somewhere, and even if it's not completely visible to us right now, it's going to come back into our lives. So, sparkler writing, exactly, Rose. That's awesome. It's really fun to do. That's a great one. And don't worry, Stacey, I'm the same. I try and photograph the moon or the stars, and unless you've got the sort of nice right camera settings, which I still confuse me a little bit. It just ends up sometimes as a little white blob, but it's still beautiful. So just a few things to remember with this one. So you're going to try and look for the intensity of light and see see where that light falls, how intense it is, whether it's that really softness on a nice cloudy day, whether that's those beautiful shadows that are creating those shapes. And then you're going to start looking at how the light moves throughout the day as well. So maybe you could look at, what's by your window and see if at the start of the day it creates that lovely golden light, and as it moves throughout the day, it might move across the wall, and it might create sort of long shadows and then back to short shadows and then long shadows again. So it's really interesting to see how that light moves. And what else can be really interesting to look at is the warmth and the coolness of those shadows. Especially this time of year, we can really feel the difference of that light. We can go and stand in a shady spot and we feel that coolness. Whereas we can stand in a sunny spot and we can start to feel really warm. So I think we can actually start to physically feel those light and those shadows as well, which can be really interesting to sort of explore more sensations within the body. And again, we're going to keep trying to look for those lights in the dark places as well. That can be really useful for us to help bring us out of that anxious feeling and start to realize there is sort of light where we hadn't expected it before. So, has anyone got any questions about the mindful photography before we move on to photography for communication? We all good? Shall I move on? Yeah, I can always, if you have got any questions, I can always come back to them later on. Cool. So we're going to move on to photography for communication. Now, this can be a little bit different than our mindful photography, but we can definitely use the skills that we start to obtain through the mindful photography. So, what is communication? Now, as quieter people, when I think of communication, I think of I must be talking to someone. And then you think, oh no, I'm not very good at talking to people. But when we actually look at the definition of communication, it is simply that act of transferring information from one place or person to another. So, it's really interesting. It's much broader than we think. And as we said earlier, it can be through crafts, it could be through arts, it could be through photography. And think of the ways that today you have received communication. It could be through your phone, through the TV, through newspapers, magazines, social media. We might have got messages from people. We might have received some post this morning. Sometimes this person can smile at you. That's a form of communication as well. So there's all these different ways that we can communicate. And I think looking at that can help us to feel a bit more connected with the world, because we realize we don't have to talk as such and put ourselves out there. We can still communicate by simply being us. And photography is an amazing tool. We can start to visually communicate with people. So this was sort of what I said earlier, one photo says 1,000 words. And it's wondering whether we can also sort of not only reframe quiet, but reframe the way that we communicate. We don't have to necessarily look at it as this solid thing. Maybe we are quiet with our voices, but we are loud with our visuals, and that's totally awesome and totally okay. And I think it's amazing to think we can communicate without actually having to say anything. So, how can photography help with communication? Well, it can help us to become more in tune with our internal and communication and dialogue. So sometimes we have a lot of thoughts and feelings going on, and they're just too much. We don't know how to deal with them, or we don't even know what they're saying half the time. It's just all this internal communication, and we don't know how to sort of voice that outwards or even understand it. So photography can really help us to become more in tune with that, and it helps us to sort of express our thoughts and our feelings. And it can help us to communicate our vision outwards as well. So if there's something you've always dreamed of doing, or something that you are really passionate about, but you don't fancy talking about it, it can really help us to communicate how we see the world outwards. It can even teach us the tricky art of conversation. As I've said, it's quite a big comfort zone stretch, but it's really good. We can learn these subtle techniques that allow us to start conversations, even with people close to us, and ask them things that we wouldn't normally ask them. So I found it really, really useful for that. And yes, definitely comfort zone stretching again when we meet new people. It's really useful. Okay, so getting started with photography for communication. So don't worry about your technical ability. As we've said quite a few times, it's not about that at all. It's just about documenting the things that you see and enjoying it and having fun. And there's no such thing as perfect. So you can photograph anything that catches your eye or relates to you. So you might see a beautiful flower and you think, ah, I like flowers. I'm going to photograph that. It's anything that you find sort of can relate to you. Just go for it as well. Just photograph everything that you want to. There's no limit with this. Just enjoy it. And what's really interesting is that you might actually start to find repeating patterns of things that you're photographing. So I've sort of discovered different interests that I hadn't recognized before simply through photography, which I'll come on to in a minute. And then the other thing I would say, if you can, is make a folder as you go along. Now, this is something I am awful with. My photos are very disorganized and everywhere. So if you don't have to, but if you want to, you can make yourself a little folder, whether it's on your phone or on your computer, or you can even make a physical note of it and just say, oh, I photographed this today. And that way, when you look back after a week, a month, a year, that's when you start to see these interests that you might not have thought you had. It's really useful for keeping everything in one place as well. Again, have fun, just enjoy it. Like I said, I've been photographing now for like 10 years, and sometimes there have been days or weeks, and I think sometimes even months, where I haven't wanted to photograph things through different reasons. So if you don't feel like photographing, that's totally okay. Like, don't put that pressure on yourself to think, oh, I must do this today. If you're not in the mood for it, that's cool. That's fine. It sometimes comes in sort of ebbs and flows, like with any creativity. So just don't put that pressure on yourself to do it if you don't want to. It's totally okay. Oh, sorry, I'm clicking on the screen. There we go. Now's your chance, Stacey. Now's your chance to make a beautiful photo book. There's some awesome websites as well that can help you do it really easily. So maybe at the end of the course we could have a look at doing that. That might be really interesting. So this first technique we're going to look at is self-discovery. So it's a really, really good way to realize you are more than your anxiety. You're not just an anxious person. Anxiety is a feeling, it's not you. And I think sometimes, I know I have before, you become quite consumed by it and you feel like that's all there is to me. I am the shy one, I am the anxious one, and that's it. But with photography, you can start to discover these interests of things you didn't know you had, and it makes you realize I'm not my anxiety. I'm so much more than that. My anxiety is just a feeling that comes and goes. So these are just a few photos that I've taken just on my phone occasionally, of things that I enjoy, and that's basically what I'm going to get you guys to do. I had to take out about 3 more hot chocolate photos that I was going to put in here because I was like, okay, clearly I'm a fan of hot chocolate. But it's just little things from every day that you can document. And as I said before, if you can, just make a little folder on your phone to save them too, that helps. So things that you might it's well behaved because there was food. So things that you might find that you start photographing or can sort of be a good starting point is pets. This is Eric. He's our lovely retired guide dog. Um, he does anything for treats, so he's quite good to model. um, so he ends up being in most of my photos, especially at the moment. You might start, photographing your friends. Thank you. he is. He's uh, he's a very pretty dog, bless him. Although he does, yeah, he thinks that rabbit poo is like dog Maltesers, and he'll just shovel them up, which instantly just gets rid of any cuteness. um, Other things you might start photographing are your friends or your family or people that you're close to. They can be a really, really good reminder of the people that you've got around you. I know this can be really hard at the moment. This is quite an old photo for me because we haven't got people around us all the time, just because it's simply where we are. But hopefully things are getting a bit easier now. So, maybe next time you see a friend or something, you might take a photo together as sort of a reminder of the people that are in your lives as well. And the other thing you might start to photograph is your favorite places or places that you go to. This could be like areas in your house as well that you might think, I really like this room. For me, that's probably my bedroom. We love sleeping. So yeah, you can start to photograph these little places around you, and that can, I find, also really helps with the gratitude aspect, because we start to realize all these wonderful areas and environments that surround us all the time. That we can start to feel very grateful for. And this was something, I am a big fan of nature, as you know, but I didn't realize I was quite a bigger fan of mushrooms as I was. So through looking over my photos, I've got so many different types of fungi. Um, so that was something that, photography kind of taught me, that I was tending to take a lot of pictures of fungi for some reason. And now it's probably one of my favorite interests, and I'm on a lot of different mushroom groups, which I probably wouldn't have been on before. So yeah, it's that chance to sort of discover things about yourself that you wouldn't have. It's really interesting. So just a few things to remember on this one is, remember that this is for you. This is to explore things for you. Um, and as we said, it's okay to take that time. It's needed. And photograph everything that you're drawn to, even if you don't know why you're drawn to it, like me with mushrooms. um, if you think that's really beautiful, I want to photograph that, even if it's something really bizarre. I had a friend that loved photographing like dustbins, which is fine. It's very random. Not saying that they were like into dustbins, but I think they were more fascinated by the shapes and things like that. Um, so it can be really interesting just to photograph these things. Eventually you can build sort of a project around that as well, and start to look at all these different aspects. And it can be good as well once you've sort of photographed, maybe you photograph something every day, maybe you photograph something every week, to take that time to reflect on those as well. So you can have a look back and think, why did I photograph this? And maybe there isn't a reason at the moment, and that's absolutely fine. But maybe you'll start to see those common themes come up. And maybe see as well if some of those photos start to remind you of sort of the positive feelings that you felt at the time. So, if you take a picture with a friend and you had like a most wonderful day, maybe when you feel slightly anxious or slightly worried about something, you can go back and look at those photos and start to see if you can, draw yourself back into that place. Maybe it's a favorite place that you photographed, and you can close your eyes and physically imagine yourself in that place. And you might start to re-feel those really calming and positive sort of attributes that you felt then. I find that's really, really useful to do. Awesome. So that's kind of the end of this workshop. But we will be running, or I will be running, a course over the next 6 months. And this course will be covering sort of 3 more mindfulness sessions and 3 more communication sessions as well. So we'll be looking at how photography can continue that mindfulness. We're looking at things such as like the flow within photography, perspective, how it can help with our gratitude. And over time, it'll also help us to reduce those feelings of anxiety and help us to be more present and aware. And then we're also going to do a bit of comfort zone stretching, and we're going to look at other ways that we can use photography for communication. So we're going to do a little bit more on the self-expression and discovery, and then we're going to start turning our attention outwards instead of inwards. So we're going to start seeing how we can use photography to communicate with others, and whether that's, another one of us in the quiet group, that's, totally good. Or it can be a friend or family. We're just going to start seeing if we can use photography as a tool to communicate our vision outwards. And then finally, we'll be looking at storytelling as well, and how we can start to put our vision into lovely stories. So that course is going to be, I think you're going to be redirected there after this session. So you can sign up for that. It is on the app as well. If you haven't signed up to the app yet, you'll be redirected there to sign up too. So thank you very much for joining me. If you've got any more questions as well, feel free to just ask in here. I should mention as well, with the course, sorry, Eric. With the course as well, I'll also be there for, any questions at any time. Same with this workshop. If you've got any questions, feel free to message me afterwards. You can do that on the app too. Yeah, so I'm here. Even if you've got if you want to learn a bit more technical stuff, I can try and help with that. But yeah, so I'm here for any questions. And then I think Stacey's put a little thing there about the course. With the course also, we'll have regular meetups as well, so we can share any thoughts or feelings if you want to, or you can message me privately through that. And then also, I should say, next week we've got lovely Stacey's workshop as well, which there's a lovely link there that she's magically made appear, so you can click on it and join, which is very exciting. Wonderful. So if you've got any more questions, please feel free to fire away. If not, I will let you all go, and have a beautiful day. Thank you, Rose, and thank you, Stacey. Thank you, Tilly. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here, so thank you. Thanks, Esther. Okay, I'll see you guys all soon. Have a good day.